What's up, everybody? Draft season is right around the corner. We've made it through about 5 quarterbacks so far, but today we're going to talk about Michael Penix Jr. All right, man. Let's get into this profile. There's a lot to talk about with Michael Penix. Out of Washington, went to the national championship game. There's clearly going to be a lot to break down. He's kind of the last prospect-ish that we've done that I think is going to maybe sneak into that first round, or at least has first-round prospects. Penix was the last one that we thought was like that. Maybe a dark horse candidate coming soon-ish, previewing that. But for all intents and purposes, he's kind of rounding out that tier for us. How do you feel about Michael Penix Jr.?
Yeah, Michael Penix is, and this is something I said in the written profile, which will be up probably around the same time as this video and stuff. But I think he's a prospect that is really, really easy to like, just based on, okay, big arm, throws down the field all the time, super productive. Obviously, I mean, people watched a lot of Huskies games because they were the coolest offense probably in college football when you have 3 NFL receivers, all that. So like, it was just a fun product to watch. And you see how fun he is on Saturdays and you go, shoot, I want that on my team. But then you actually analyze him as a prospect and like what he is asked to do, what he's going to be asked to do in the NFL, how different that is from what he did in college, what his strengths were in college versus like how tenable that is in the NFL. I'm just worried because I think he got away with not having to deal with pressure in the pocket all that much in college, which I think he's pretty bad under pressure, and that's going to be an issue. He doesn't have much creativity to him, but he didn't need it at Washington. All of his best throws at Washington were down the field, which is great and going to be useful in the NFL, but he wasn't that good in any other area of the field. And I think that's going to be more of a problem in the NFL. So he, to me, very much feels like a prospect who super fun on Saturdays, will have an NFL career, but I'm not as sold on him as some of the first round hype for sure.
Well, let's get right into the nitty gritty, man. We've got a film clip pulled up here. That's how we prefer to evaluate these players. If you don't know what Derrik does for us here at Reception Perception, he does what Matt Harmon does with wide receivers, but for quarterbacks. So he isolates these guys from their offense as best as you can, from their receivers as best as you can, tracks this stuff, and all of that data and info comes from film reviews. So what we do on these videos is we just kind of walk through how Derrik views all this stuff. He talks us through these film reviews, and we're going to start with one right now.
Yeah, so this play against, I want to say this was Cal. Penix's best trait, I think, pretty unequivocally, like literally no matter who you ask, whether it's just some dude at the bar or Daniel Jeremiah, they're going to say Penix's best trait is throwing down the field. His numbers are not quite as good as you would think, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but I do think a lot of his best throws are down the field. He's really a guy where, like, when he's on, when he's feeling it, when he's hitting it correctly, it just looks so pretty, and he's able to put really, really good velocity on the ball and get just enough arc to where it can kind of beautifully fall into his player's hands. All you're going to see here is, they've got Washington is 3-by-1 into the boundary. They've got this isolated receiver all the way to the right side. They are very clearly trying to throw a one-on-one go ball, and Michael Penix is very, very willing to do that. Obviously, they've got like press coverage here, single high. That is instant indicator that Penix is going to want to throw this. He's pretty much never shies away from doing this. 1, 2, 3, balls out, hits him right in the hands. I mean, you really cannot throw this ball any better. And like I said, Michael Penix maybe doesn't do this quite as consistently as you might think with all the highlights that he has of it. But man, when he really does just unload 20, 30-yard ball, it can look like this. And it's some of the prettiest stuff you'll find in the class.
One of the things you highlighted to me about Penix when we did the audio show was his like hyper aggressive nature. And that comes through very clearly on a lot of his film, a lot of his play at Washington. He's not ever scared to make a throw. It's not really in his profile. He will throw it into 1, 2, 3 coverage, does not matter. He really trusted his receivers. He had a really great group around him. And like that exemplified here, like he doesn't have the highest release point of the football, but that doesn't really change his ability to kind of get it up and over players like you see here. All the time. I think you do see that sometimes as he's going, but hyper aggressive, like you said, not afraid to take these shots.
Right. And I do want to say quickly, like, we can say all we want about, he had, 3 NFL receivers. And I do think that changes his evaluation a little bit and let him get away with stuff. But like, when you have 3 NFL receivers, man, just go chuck it up to him. And he did it. Like, he took advantage of what he had. And I think there's value in that. Like, I remember years ago, people did this with Andy Dalton. They were like, oh, he just throws it up to AJ Green. Yeah, man, he's AJ Green. Throw it to him. And I think Michael Penix did a great job of that.
As soon as you get to the NFL, it's like the opposite. When you're in college, they're like, oh, like all you have are these great players. Like, why don't you, of course you could throw it up to them. And then you get to the NFL and you're like, throw it up to your good players.
Yeah,
please.
Why doesn't he throw it to him as much? Yeah, exactly.
You're like, what do you want? It's similar. Like I still get people on the Jaden Daniels video being like, oh, well, he's got a really great offense in football. Like, you can't knock him because he's got the good offense. Like, yeah, no, we can't knock him one way or the other. Like, we are just looking at these players with what they have and how they utilize it. If you have a great offense and you keep checking it down to your running back with 3 NFL receivers, that's going to be a knock on your profile more than anything else. I want to see you using the players around you more than I care about how good they are.
Exactly. I mean, that's what a quarterback's about. Maximize what you got. So the deep ball is, I think, pretty clearly the best thing with Michael Penix. Unfortunately, as I've hinted at a lot on the audio show and the written profile, I still have a lot of questions about Michael Penix and what he does on film. This is a good example. We talked a lot about he is very aggressive. He is kind of aggressive to a fault because I think he is willing to do a lot of guesswork when it comes to picking apart zone coverages. He kind of just willing to hope that somebody's not going to be there and doesn't necessarily always understand all of the moving parts. So what you're going to get here in this clip is Michigan State is going to bail into like a kind of weird too high coverage where they're looking like they're going to blitz and they're going to drop that into a pretty funky looking underneath distribution. But basically you're going to get this field safety flying off the hash. This guy's going to play in the flat, kind of like a cover 2 look. This is going to end up playing out more of like a quarters where this guy stays on the hash. And this corner to the other side is going to kind of play up the sideline a little bit. What's important to note is that if the corner is going to play here like this, and the tight end is going to go away, he's going to come under the formation. This corner has nothing to play for on this side of the field now, so he can overlap back to the middle of the field. Michael Penix just like forgets that that's a possibility and just forgets that this corner exists at all. And what you're going to see when I roll the clip here is he's going to go back 1, 2, 3. He tries to hit this crossing route right into where this corner is going to come overlap, tips it up, and I believe it gets picked off. Like, that is the kind of stuff I think you see with Michael Penix a lot, where it's really cool that he's aggressive and willing to give his guys chances, but I think he does this a lot where he just kind of guesses and prays that things are going to be open. Or maybe he just trusts that he can get the ball there to his guy and that he's going to be able to make a play. I don't know. But to me, it just seems like he kind of blocks this corner out of his mind and then throws the ball anyway.
Yeah, I mean, his tight window throws are something that not necessarily he struggled with on his profile, but something that I think this really highlights is his middle of the field on our profile, which we're going to talk about a little later with his chart. Like, that was one of kind of his worst areas, is doing those cross routes in the middle of the field. And that's where you really need to be able to read where your linebackers are sitting in zone, where your nickel cornerbacks are sitting in the zone coverage. On these cover 2 shells, or when like NFL, you're going to see a lot of cover 2. The NFL has basically switched to a cover 2 league. You need to be able to read when those cornerbacks are dropping back, when those safeties are coming down, who is lining up where, and being able to throw across the middle of the field is critical in a lot of modern day NFL offenses. So that being a question of the profile, to me, is kind of a big deal. Like, I don't mind that he can throw down the field. I love that. But if you're struggling to read middle of the field offenses, a lot of modern NFL offenses, that's going to be an issue for him.
100%. And that's like I said, I agree with you. Like, one of my biggest issues with him is he doesn't throw middle of the field all that well or consistently. And he was really bad in zone coverage, per my numbers, like 63.4% success rate. That to me speaks to someone who I think kind of struggles to understand where moving pieces are, and able to anticipate all that sort of stuff. So maybe he can fix it in the NFL, but I don't know. He's been starting for 6 years, so that's why this particularly gives me this kind of concern.
Yeah, and giving context on that zone numbers is an average mark for a zone success rate for college quarterbacks we've had so far is anywhere around that 70 to 72% range. 63.4 is the lowest we've charted so far, or you've charted so far of this class. Like, that is not just like a little below average. Like, that's a pretty alarming mark for a college quarterback to be throwing. All right, and of course we have to have a natty clip. I mean, they went to the natty, played Michigan, didn't win, but you got to have a natty clip when you do a player profile. one of the biggest things I saw when I was doing my film review of Penix was he has a pretty unique arm angle. He side releases a lot on the ball, which is something you see a lot in the NFL. We talked about it just a second here on the break, but like you see Stafford do that. You see Lamar do that. My issue with Penix is he doesn't kind of change that adjustment all that often. You see it a lot where he is sidearming like the deep balls. He's sidearming all this type of stuff. It's not, I feel like sidearm is the wrong through. He just has a really low release angle. And there's a lot of comparisons between quarterbacks and pitchers. And I see it in some places, I see it and don't. But with him, it's like the only pass you could throw is a curveball. Like if that's your only release angle, your only time, you need to be able to adjust that. You need to be able to release over linemen. You need to be able to release like a quicker speed that's not over there to get across the middle of the field. If your release angle is one thing consistently throughout all the time, you are going to struggle to layer your throws, to layer them across the different levels of the field. And I think this clip shows it really well. And then you have some other things you want to talk about here too, I know.
Yeah, I mean, but that's a great starting point. I think because I have a huge issue with that with Penix is that his release is very low. And I think what you see a lot of the times with guys who have very low releases is that they almost throw the ball like a javelin, where they're just throwing it straight and they can't really get that up and down that you like to see. Like Russell Wilson is like the complete opposite of this, where he has such a long, like over the top release. Why do you think he gets such good air under his deep throws? Why do you think he's able to put layers on some of his throws, especially at his peak? It's because he has that over the top motion that you're able to get that up and down. Penix, I think, really struggles with that. And I think in particular, throws outside the numbers really require a quarterback to have that ability, unless you are just like Cam Newton level throwing through a brick wall. Like that's really one of the only exceptions I've ever seen. And Penix just doesn't really have that. And you're going to see that here. He's going to throw a route. I think it's a corner route, like a sail route over to the right sideline. What you're going to see is like he's a little bit finicky in the way he resets here. Like you can see him kind of like, it's not super, super clean. And so for him to be like that and like be awkward and twitchy, he just doesn't have a natural enough throwing motion to get away with that. And you see him just try to gun this in there. Like he feels like he's late and he just completely whiffs, puts 5 yards extra on this ball, puts it over. It's like, not only does he throw this over the guy's head, I think that's Jalen Polk. Not only does he throw it over his head like vertically, this ball is like on his back shoulder instead of like getting him over to, like this ball should be on the 28-yard line, probably pretty close. Like let him run into the boundary, just let him take it there. You have so much space under this safety and he just misses. And I think you see this a lot from Michael Penix, especially when he's throwing outside the numbers or other throws where he just has to put a little bit of air and layering under the ball.
Yeah, and I know people, especially some of those in the comments on these videos, are like, yeah, you're picking these plays, you're picking these bad plays. We don't just go out and find a bad play or a good play that we want to highlight. We go out and we're trying to find plays that we think summarize some of the things. This is something that you see across the film. It's not just, oh, we found a bad clip from the National. It's something that's like, this is something that we find in the game. These are plays that you can see throughout his film. You can just go watch the Texas game if you want to think Michael Penix is a top 5 pick. That's great. But if you want to watch through the whole season, you're going to see like there are a lot of things he does good and there are a lot of things that he doesn't do so great, like this, where he really needs to be able to pick this up to the NFL level. And this clip especially, yes, this is not a game. Michigan's a really great defense. He's not really under duress here. There's not a ton of pressure. Like no one's getting through the line here. He's got a second. He could really set his feet there, but he almost double clutches and kind of has that like off center. Like there's no reason for him not to set his feet and get that arm release the way he wants to. And like you said, he doesn't have the natural like arm movement to be able to hit that side arm throws. You do see that in your charting really well. I think that was something that I noticed pretty easily. His out-of-pocket rate was pretty low for the class. Not a ton of out-of-pocket throws, but his success rate was extremely low. 46% success rate on out-of-pocket throws. Just kind of highlights that when he's on the move running like that, that release angle can be really detriment because it's hard to be, a lot of times you're rolling out to, yes, he's a left-handed quarterback, so it's a little different from what you normally see, but usually you roll out to your dominant hand and you can kind of make that throw with your body movement. When you have a lower release like that, it's really hard to get that momentum to like smoothly release. So when you're running out one way to the other, I think that kind of leads to where we saw like a lot less accurate out of the pocket.
100%. And Penix, put this in my written write up. He's like a flat cannon. If you can just put him in one spot and we're just trying to throw missiles, cool. You cannot move this thing though. You can't like adjust it all that well. You can't, put little touch on it. Like that's just not who he is. He's very much like requires certain conditions to make certain throws. And to your point, yeah, the charting when he was outside the numbers, which obviously your throwing platform is very different from whatever you're doing inside the pocket. He's just not very good. And then I think even within the pocket, anytime either his platform gets disrupted or situations like this where he makes it a little bit messy himself, you really start to see some tough throws from him like this.
Yeah, he may be the most athletic pocket quarterback I've ever seen. The most athletic, like I am a true pocket quarterback at the same time that I've seen so far in my film analysis of these college quarterbacks.
He's gonna give Derrik Carr a run for his money. That man can move, but you would never know it by watching him play.
I mean, I think Penix has Carr beat at athletic. I don't think Carr can run a 4.33. I don't believe it. I'll believe it when I see it. But in that case, I'm like, I don't know. First I've seen of it for sure. All right, before we close out the show, let's take a look at his profile. This is what we do here at Reception Perception. You'll see these charts over social media for the wide receivers. You'll see them for the quarterbacks. This is kind of an amalgamation of Derrik's charting. We have the route by route stuff too. This is our heat map. So you're just going to see kind of like the areas of the field that he throws well, man, zone, total adjusted accuracy. Just kind of gives their overall profile a good read to what you see, like where they're throwing, what they do well, and what coverages they throw well against. I think this highlights a lot of the stuff you were talking about with the deep ball coverage across the middle of the field. But walk me through his success rate map just a little bit here.
Yeah, so I'll start with the deep ball stuff because I think that's the biggest part of his game in general. As you can see, only 3, there's no marks of green, and even his 36.5% success rate down the right side is that's like barely in the average range. I think average cuts off at like 35%, so he barely is able to stay within that range. So it's not as it doesn't pop as much as you would think by watching his highlight film and stuff. The only thing that I would say about that is I do think he is a good deep ball thrower. I think he's probably better than the numbers suggest. They're probably just a little bit lower because, like I mentioned in one of the clips, there are just times where he's like, Jalen Polk's down there somewhere, dude. And that's totally reasonable. That's totally fine. It's just that sometimes when you're doing that, there isn't even an accurate throw to be made. You're just praying that he's going to go get it. And that's fine. I think that was a fine way for him to operate, but that's why maybe the numbers look a little bit less good than you would think for how he gets talked about as a deep ball passer. The other stuff is where I get actually concerned, where he is just a really not good short game passer, 1 to 10. He is, I think part of that is, like I said, he is kind of a guy who throws 100 miles an hour all the time. That can be a little bit of an issue when you're throwing in the 1 to 10 yard area. Sometimes you need to take a little something off, really just make it easy to catch. For the receiver, he just doesn't really have that. And then again, some of the arm angle stuff, sometimes when you're throwing quick game, you got to adjust a little bit to get it outside a guy's arm, something like that. He just doesn't really have that in his game. The middle of the field is also super concerning. The intermediate area in general, but particularly in between the numbers, which is what I count as middle of the field when I do my charting. I think when you watch him on film, he's late a lot throwing to the middle of the field. He can be a little bit hesitant and he won't do it a lot. He would rather just throw a go ball down the sideline, which again, when you have Rolo Dune's fine, but also you have Jalen McMillan over the middle, pretty good player. So you would think he would have been a little bit more willing and capable of doing it, but it's just not something I really saw from his game. I think he struggles to anticipate those windows when they're cutting in between zones, and then even against man when you're trying to get a little bit of layering, whether it's on a seam route, deep over route, just doesn't really have that soft touch in his bag. So I think that's a lot of what you see here on the heat map. I think it's pretty representative of the way he plays.
Yeah, I mean, I think this has been one of the heat maps that has been more copy paste for what we see on the film. Yep. It's dude's throwing down the field a lot and he's good at it. At least at average down the field, and he's doing it a lot, so those are really good marks. Talk to me a little bit about NFL success. What are you kind of looking for? Where do you want him to go to would you like? I know we say like he lets down in a lot of areas. I still think he's got a path to NFL success in his career. I don't think he's just like a lost cause here. Like he has some of the tangibles. He's a good pocket passer. He is athletic, and he does have a really good deep ball. What are you looking in terms of like team fit? What are you looking in terms of like draft capital?
In terms of draft capital, I mean, personally, I wouldn't touch him in the first 2 rounds just because, one, some of all the concerns I've said, but also like he's a 6-year starter who's, shredded his shoulders and also his knee twice. I think sometimes we're like underrating how unprecedented it is that a guy has started for 6 years. Like we almost don't know how to talk about these guys. And I think we're almost like misunderstanding how much experience that allowed him to play with and how helpful that was for him to look this good, because he just never looked that good earlier in his career. What I will say though is if I was constructing a team, the ideal situation is like what the Bucs had with Brady, where it's like, okay, this offensive line is pretty dang good. He can be a stationary passer back there. And we have Mike Evans who can go up and get the ball, and Chris Godwin, who not as good as Mike Evans at doing that, but like he can go up and get the ball and really fight for it in traffic. That to me is like, and at the time they were running the Bruce Arians, like we're just going to throw it 20 yards down the field immediately type of offense. Like that to me is the ideal spot for him. I also think that is really difficult to construct. I think it's just like you're towing a very fine line. And I think they got away with it in part because they had Tom Brady. And even before that, I mean, think of all the other Bruce Arians quarterbacks there have been, like the prominent ones that we think of. It's like, okay, Brady did it. Carson Palmer did it. Andrew Luck was one, like Ben Roethlisberger. These are really, really good quarterbacks who were like supposed to be good. Like, you know what I mean? Like they had such a, like so much behind them. Whereas I think Penix, it's tougher to see him getting into that range. But like I said, I think that's probably the best type of team you want to build around him. The best shot at that is probably like Las Vegas, just purely on Devontae Adams. It's like, okay, he can just, Devontae's down there somewhere. Yeah. So that's probably his best bet.
I think I'd like to see him go like, honestly, I think he'd be like a really solid backup for a quarterback to start his career. I like they have very not similar prospects at all, but I don't really mind if he would be like a backup to Lamar in Baltimore. I feel like that'd be fun. They're asking Lamar to do more pocket stuff anyway, so I don't think it'd be like a crazy scheme fit to have him be a backup. And you have what you said, like a really solid run, a really good offensive line, and weapons along the boundary. Like you have Zay Flowers, Bateman, Mark Andrews. I imagine they'll probably pick someone up between there. I don't know if I'm like, I think he's going to be able to start right away in the NFL, and I don't know if NFL teams are going to see that either. I do think someone will take a shot on him just based off of the ceiling we saw at Texas, probably in the second round and maybe early third. But I agree with you. I think he's probably off the first round board. I don't think there's going to be a lot of teams that see him as like a first round prospect.
Yeah, I think it's just hard to justify for a guy who's that old, that injured. And in a lot of ways, it's hard to evaluate just because of how insanely good the offense was. I think there's probably going to be a little bit too much for teams to get over there.
Well, thanks everybody for watching this one. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, we are nearing 10K on the Matt Harmon channel, and we're going to be doing a big giveaway for that. Not just like here's a free reception perception subscription. We have something cooking for that. So make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you like these videos, give us a like. If you disagree with our takes, throw them in the comments. I know you're going to anyway. And go check out Derrik's stuff on the site. Everything on Michael Penix Jr. will be out by the time you see this. And if you want a little bit more, we have an audio podcast as well. So go check that out. Until then, we'll see y'all next time.